Imagine a tank battle where the most dangerous weapon is something you can't see. Not the gun, not the armor, not the engine. A whisper, a voice that cuts cleanly through engine roar and artillery thunder. Today we're diving into what the German army missed, why Sherman crews, armed with secret radios the enemy didn't expect, could move like one mind across sand, mountains, hedgerows, and rivers. Stay with me, because by the end we'll open wartime manuals and official reports that show, line by line, how an invisible network quietly changed the odds of survival. Picture North Africa in early 1943. Dust hangs low. Tanks lurch through broken ground. Commanders strain to make sense of the battlefield. In one force, crews struggle with garbled orders, clipped words, and static that sounds like a storm trapped in a metal box. In the other, voices land clear, steady, almost calm. Left 200 halt, fire. No flags, no hand signals, just confidence that the message you send is the message your wingman hears. That contrast. The clarity of frequency modulation versus the noise of amplitude modulation is the heart of our story. What the German army missed wasn't a single clever trick, it was a system. The U.S. Army Signal Corps standardized compact, crystal-controlled FM sets for medium tanks so that every crew in a platoon heard the same truth at the same time. The names sound dry. Radio sets with alphanumeric labels, but the effects were anything but reliable channels. Preset frequencies, an intercom that let every crewman speak up the instant he saw a threat. The result? A moving conversation across steel hulls, where decisions traveled faster than shells. Let's slow down and strip this to the essentials. 2 radio worlds, 2 ways of surviving. In an AM set, any electrical spark, any engine whine, any stray burst of energy can ride along with your words. In a tank, that means your own machine can ruin your message. In an FM set, your receiver locks to the voice signal and ignores most of the trash. That's not magic. It's engineering, but in combat, engineering that keeps meaning intact is close to magic. Now imagine the practical difference. You're a platoon leader. A crest hides your wingman. In an AM world, you repeat yourself, slow down, and hope the third try gets through. In an FM world, you say it once and maneuver continues. The moment the first tank reports a flank threat, the others pivot before the threat becomes a kill. That speed, call it tempo, call it rhythm, multiplies across a company, a battalion, a division, when history books describe. Battlefield initiative. This is what it feels like from inside a headset. Here's a thought experiment. If you make 2 tanks better, you improve 2 tanks. If you connect 2 tanks better, you improve all of them. The Sherman was a solid medium tank with strengths and weaknesses like any machine. But when you add dependable FM radios to every hull in a unit, you change the scale of the machine. The vehicle is no longer a single tank. The vehicle is the net, and that net had very specific hardware. U.S. medium tanks carried a transmitter designed to put out enough power for formations to keep in touch as they moved through real terrain, not just across a test range. Frequencies were chosen for armored units. Channels were crystal controlled. Install the crystal for a channel, and everyone tuned to that channel heard the same thing without fiddling a dial while bouncing over rocks. Receivers were built to hear clearly. Even when the hull shook and the gun thundered, the intercom tied commander, gunner, loader, and driver into a single nervous system. A fleeting silhouette at 2 o'clock could become a whole platoon warning in a heartbeat. Across the line, German armored radios were rugged and, in their best installations, very capable. But 2 constraints kept biting. First, most tank sets in that era used AM voice. In a laboratory, AM is fine. In a moving tank, full of ignition spikes, alternating current whine, track noise, and motorized turret drives, AM turns honest. Speech into a contest with static. Second, not every German tank carried a full transmitter receiver set. Platoon and company leaders did. Many others had receiver-only sets intended to take orders, not send warnings. That made sense in a rigid hierarchy. It made less sense when a split-second sighting by a subordinate crew could save the formation. This isn't about national genius. It's about logistics and doctrine. The U.S. chose to make dependable FM voice the baseline for medium tanks and then produced enough sets to put 1 in every vehicle that needed it. That decision meant a junior gunner's report had the same radio path to the commander as the commander's order had back to the gunner. Meanwhile, German industry, stretched by multiple fronts and production priorities, couldn't equip every turret with the same transmit-receive capability. In the field, that difference doesn't look like an equipment table. It looks like one side talking, and the other side often only listening. Let's go from theory to ground truth. The North African campaign taught the U.S. hard lessons. How dust kills moving parts, how heat punishes tubes and wiring, how fast-moving columns tangle without a common language on the air. Those lessons drove refinements that made the FM sets more maintainable, more stable, more soldier-proof. By late 1942 and into 1943, units landing in Morocco and Algeria carried standardized FM suites for their medium tanks. The sets weren't delicate curiosities. They were field equipment with clear manuals, prescribed installation points, and parts lists that supply sergeants could actually order. If something failed, you swapped a unit. If a frequency plan changed, you pulled and installed the right crystals and updated the card on the turret wall. But does clear voice really matter once shells start flying? Listen to after-action patterns that repeat across theaters. Armored formations that could keep a clean company net while under fire brought artillery on target faster. Recon elements that could cut through vehicle noise with crisp reports kept main bodies out of ambushes. Tank infantry teams that could speak reliably to each other closed gaps before enemies slipped through. Each of those actions depends on a simple event. One human speaks, another hears. Both trust what they heard. FM made that event routine. Now shift the map to Italy. Mountains compress sound and sight. Valleys bend radio signals in ugly ways. If your set turns interference into audible pain, you'll use it less when you need it most. If your set stays intelligible, you'll push it harder, up a ridge, through a defile, across a muddy river road, because you've learned it won't abandon you when the terrain turns cruel. Official accounts of the Italian campaign describe armored infantry cooperation under conditions that ought to have shattered coordination. Yet time and again, U.S. units kept their nets alive enough to move, shoot, and call supporting fires in places where hand signals were laughably inadequate. Then comes Normandy. Hedgerows break the battlefield into 1,000 rooms. You can be 30 meters from friendly infantry and, for all practical purposes, be alone. In that maze, a tank's radio becomes more than a steering wheel. It becomes a lifeline. But there was a catch. Armored FM sets and infantry backpack sets lived on different frequency families. The fix, improvised and then institutionalized, was beautifully simple. Wire a rugged telephone to the tank's intercom so that a nearby rifleman could grab the handset and speak directly to the crew. At first, that was a field trick. Soon, it became a recognized practice with standard parts and instructions. The point isn't romance. The point is that the network kept widening because the radios were stable enough and simple enough that soldiers trusted them with their lives. If you're sensing a pattern, you're right. Hardware enables a habit, and the habit becomes doctrine. U.S. armored units learned to operate as flexible task forces because their nets could carry the complexity. Column, it didn't have to be column of forever. You could pull 2 platoons from 1 battalion, a recon troop from another, and an artillery battery from a third, fuse them into a task force, and know they could all talk before the first engine turned over. That modularity terrified opponents who expected an enemy organized like a parade ground. It also demanded radios that turned the plan on paper into a plan on air. We need to talk about power and stability without putting you to sleep. Here's the plain version. Tank radios need enough output to be heard at useful ranges while everything in the vehicle conspires to drown them out. They need to hold their frequency when the hull is shaking, when the temperature swings, and when the operator is thinking about survival, not about gently nudging a tuning knob. They need a power supply that cleans up the filthiest electrical noise and a mounting system that keeps connectors tight after 100 kilometers of abuse. The U.S. sets that went into Shermans were engineered, from the transformer up to the microphone, with those facts in mind. They weren't perfect, but they were predictable, and predictability is the true gold of combat systems. On the German side, you'll find smart, well-built sets in preserved vehicles and museums, proof that the engineers knew their craft. But wartime evaluations noted recurring troubles. ignition interference bleeding into AM voice antenna. Installations that were good on paper but hard to keep perfect in the field. And, most importantly, the uneven distribution of full transmitter-receiver sets within tank platoons. When your doctrine assumes that only leaders speak and subordinates mostly listen, you inevitably miss the moment when a subordinate sees what the leader cannot. Every battlefield has that moment. The side that hears it earliest owns the next 30 seconds. Let's return to our title, because it's more than a hook. What the German army missed was not that Americans had radios. Everyone knew that. But that the Americans treated dependable, unit-wide FM voice as a weapon system. Manuals codified it. Tables of organization funded it. Factories produced to that plan. Training made it muscle memory. And when the test came, Tunisia's hills, Sicily's ridges, Italy's valleys, Normandy's hedgerows, the net held. A lone tank might be outgunned. A connected platoon could be outflanked. But a connected company, spread across terrain and still acting in concert, could write a different fight. There's a human dimension we can't ignore. Ask veterans what good radios meant, and you don't get a lecture on circuits. You get a look. The look of someone who remembers that even when a ridge cut them off from sight, a voice still reached them. We're here, shift left, stand by. In a war where isolation killed, that sentence, we're here, saves lives. And it only lands if the microphone you press is tied to a net you trust. Before we go deeper, let me set a promise. We're going to pull specific, official documents into the light. Field manuals, equipment technical manuals, signal corps histories, theater histories, and engineering notes, so you can see exactly how these sets were spec'd, installed, and used. We'll read the frequency ranges, the channel plans, the power ratings, the installation diagrams that show where the transmitter sat in a Sherman, how the antenna was grounded, how the intercom tied the crew together. We'll compare that to the German sets that armored units relied on. Their intended ranges, their modulation choices, the situations where they shined and the ones where they struggled. And then we'll match those specs to the realities on the ground, where the difference between message received and say again could be a crater and a burning hull. Stay with me, because the strongest proof is still ahead. In a moment, we'll open the U.S. tank radio manual and point to the lines that explain why a Sherman crew could change channels in seconds and keep the net intact. We'll open the wartime technical evaluation of German tank radios and see how often units fielded receiver-only sets. We'll cross-check the signal corps history that tracks how FM moved from experiment to standard, and we'll step into the official campaign histories that, without drama, show what reliable voice nets enabled on the most unforgiving ground. And then, only then, we'll ask the question that matters. In a fair fight between platforms, how much of victory belongs to the network? If you've ever wondered why some units look like they're moving in slow motion while others seem to glide through chaos, the answer is often invisible. The most decisive weapon might be a sentence spoken at the right second over the right net. And once you hear how those nets were built and why they endured, you'll see the Sherman not only as a tank, but as a node in something larger, a weapon made of people and radios and trust. Ready? Let's lift the cover of the radio set every Sherman crew knew by heart, trace its channels, feel its logic, and watch how a quiet engineering choice, FM, crystal control, a dependable intercom, turned into battlefield tempo. Then we'll put that next to the German experience, where capable sets met harsh field conditions and a doctrine that often kept too many crews silent. The difference is the story. The story is the lesson. And the lesson begins with a single, clear word across a moving battlefield. Go. Lift the cover with me. You're inside a Sherman now. The turret is cramped, the engine rumbling through steel, the air thick with dust and cordite. On your left, bolted into the hull, sits the radio stack the crew knows by touch. A power unit that tames the tank's dirty electrics, a transmitter that actually throws your voice across the fight, and receivers whose dials are set before you roll. The nicknames and part numbers matter to mechanics. What matters to you is that this set turns chaos into sentences, 10 crystal-controlled channels already aligned, a microphone that doesn't need you to shout, an intercom that makes for crewman one brain. Say it with me once. Clarity beats volume. Frequency modulation isn't flashy, it's deliberate. Instead of letting every spark and whine ride along with your words, FM locks onto the meaning and discards most of the trash. In a tank, that's the difference between left, fire, and LUF, drowned by your own engine. When the hull bucks and the gun recoils, the signal stays intelligible. When artillery hammers a ridge, the net doesn't turn into a howl. You don't baby it. You use it. Now, the second edge, stability. Those channels aren't close enough. They're set by crystals so that your platoon's channel 3 is your company's channel 3 is the battalion's channel 3. You don't tune by feel while bouncing over rocks. You select. That's not a small deal. It's the reason a lieutenant can switch from the platoon net to the company net without fumbling, pass a contact report up, and slip back down to give a fire order before the target crests a hedgerow. And when your commander carries 2 receivers, he can monitor both nets at once. Orders flowing down, warnings flowing up, a living circuit of intent and information. Feel the intercom in your throat mic. A loader's single word, left, becomes the whole crew's reflex. The driver eases, the gunner slews, the commander frames the shot, the coax barks, the main gun follows. That intercom is not an accessory. It's a nervous system. It keeps the commander from becoming a messenger pigeon between 3 shouting men in a metal room. It is speed, and speed is survival. Slide the hatch. We're in North Africa now, late 1942 into early 1943. The ground is broken, the distances deceptive, the dust relentless. American armored units arrive after Operation Torch, already speaking a common language on the air. Frequencies assigned, call signs assigned, a net diagram taped where every crew can see it. When the column stretches over kilometers, the radio nets still stitch it together. When a lead tank stumbles into a minefield, the call goes out once, clear, and the whole column reacts in seconds, not minutes. Across the line, German armored troops are brave, experienced, and riding powerful machines. But the air they inhabit is different. Their standard tank sets in this period speak AM voice. And in a moving vehicle, AM is a magnet for trouble. Ignition spikes from every cylinder, whine from turret motors, the restless crackle of electricity in a metal hull. Skilled operators can fight through it. On a test range, range is fine, but when you're bounding by rushes, turning, braking, surging over wadis, every new jolt adds to the noise. It's nobody's fault. It's physics in a harsh place. There's another difference you can't hear until you need it. In many German platoons, only leaders have full transmit-receive sets. The rest carry receivers and listen. That keeps the net orderly. It also means a subordinate crew who suddenly sees the thing that matters most. A glint on a ridge, a puff of dust where there should be none, may have no path to push that truth back onto the air. Orders flow down well. Warnings struggle to flow up. In an American platoon, that same sighting becomes a calm sentence that the whole formation hears. Let's stay inside the manuals just long enough to understand why this works in motion. A tank is a rolling factory of electrical interference. To survive there, a radio needs 3 things: a clean, filtered power path, an antenna installation that's grounded like your life depends on it, and a modulation method that doesn't carry every spark into the operator's ear. The U.S. tank sets were engineered and installed with those assumptions built in. Power conditioning that smooths spikes, a whip antenna mounted and bonded so the hull becomes part of the system instead of a noisy enemy. FM voice that, by design, resists the very kind of noise a tank generates. North Africa teaches hard lessons. Dust fouls everything. Heat punishes vacuum tubes and insulation. Vibrations loosen the fittings you forgot to safety wire. But in unit after unit, the repair path is clear. Swap a failed module, reseat a connector, verify the crystal and channel card, get back on the air. The point isn't that these sets never fail. The point is that they fail in ways crews can fix, and, more importantly, they fail less under the exact conditions that grind AM voice into static. Crews respect gear that works. They rely on gear that keeps working when the ride turns violent. Listen to a march column on a good net. Brevity, discipline, trust, red 2, pace, red 3, closed, contact right, far, on. That's how a language turns into action. The guides and procedures aren't an afterthought. Allied radio telephone discipline, drilled and standardized. makes air that could be chaos into something you can parse at combat speed. You can hear it. Not clipped, not panicked, just purposeful. Now walk into a fight like Kasserine, where units are mixed, ground is treacherous, and nobody has the luxury of a perfect plan. In the confusion, the difference between a net that holds and a net that collapses is the difference between scattered tanks dying as individuals and scattered tanks still acting as a team. American units take their knocks, plenty of them, but they keep talking. A tank that has never met another tank joins a net, learns the local language in a minute, and becomes useful instead of a stranger. That is not romance. It's radio. Climb a map north and east with me. Sicily, then mainland Italy. Now the hills are steeper, the valleys narrower, the weather worse. If you want to design a laboratory to break radio communications, you build the Apennines. Multipath reflections, shadowed ravines, ridge lines that turn a kilometer into an hour. This is where a voice net proves whether it's a fair-weather friend or a companion in misery. Over and over. Official accounts from the theater describe armor and infantry maintaining contact that logic says should have failed. It doesn't mean every call went through. It means enough calls went through, consistently enough, that plans survived the terrain. Pause on a detail that matters. Dual receiver commanders. Imagine you're leading a platoon up a valley while also listening to the company commander who's shaping the fight over the next ridgeline. With two sets of ears, you don't have to choose between the order coming down and the warning coming up. You can hear both, pass both, and keep your men's attention on the enemy instead of on your own uncertainty. That's the subtle geometry of a good net. It reduces the time you spend guessing. There is humility in the engineering here. Nobody promises miracles. The channel plan is not exotic. The power is not theatrical. The microphones and headsets are built to be thrown into a corner and still work. The genius is in declaring, every medium tank will have this, and then making the industrial choices that turn that sentence into reality. When new battalions stand up, their radios arrive with them. When replacements join a depleted unit, they're trained on the same handset, the same brevity, the same call and response. The network does not have favorite children. It is universal, or it is nothing. Let's talk about what the German army missed. Because it's not that they lacked radio expertise. They pioneered radio usage in armored warfare in the interwar years. Their engineers produced capable sets. Their doctrine valued coordination. But the war they fought by 1943 was a war of attrition in factories as much as in fields. Putting a full transmit-receive set into every turret was a production decision as much as a tactical one. Standardizing on AM voice in that era was a reasonable technical choice until you drove 1,000 kilometers over bad ground and found that the noise floor had followed you into every fight. And holding to a net where only leaders speak works until the battlefield scatters you and survival depends on a loader's voice 2 tanks over. A moment now for ground truth stories that live in official pages. North Africa's reports record the recurring pattern. Where nets stayed intact, artillery arrived when called. Where nets broke, units hesitated and paid. In Italy, battalion diaries describe tank infantry teams forming and reforming on the fly, with radios carrying that flexibility up steep slopes and down into ravines. These aren't glorious phrases. They read like a logbook, but the effect is the same. Coordination persists where sight and sound vanish. And then, Normandy. The hedgerows turn the battlefield into a labyrinth. You can't see past the next wall. Tanks and infantry can be 10 paces apart and unable to help each other. The armored radios do their job across the armored nets, but the infantry's backpack sets live on a different neighborhood of the spectrum. The field solution is almost comically simple. Bolt a rugged telephone to the outside of the tank and wire it into the crew intercom. Now a rifleman can grab the handset, speak to the commander inside, and say, "Don't go forward. Panzer Faust left corner." At first it's improvisation, then it becomes standard practice, parts issued, instructions printed. The network widens again, not because of a miracle device, but because soldiers trusted the devices they already had enough to knit them together. Let's put ears on that sound. A platoon pushes a lane through bocage. The first tank halts at a narrow gap. An infantry sergeant taps the rear telephone. Speaks. The commander inside answers. The message goes to every crewman in a breath. The gunner shifts to watch the corner. The driver angles the hull. The loader is ready. The second tank covers the next hedge. A mortar round thumps behind. A report goes up to the company net. Another goes sideways to a neighboring platoon that can't see you but can now act for you. None of this requires drama on the air. It requires clean, ordinary voice that keeps its meaning under pressure. People love to talk about command and control as if it's a board covered in maps. In a Sherman with a working net, command and control is a voice you trust when you can't see. It's the knowledge that when you say stop, 3 other vehicles stop now, not when the static clears. It's knowing that if your own set dies, you can swap a unit and be back on a channel the rest of the outfit already shares. You're not just saving seconds. You're saving certainty. And when certainty becomes normal, doctrine evolves. The U.S. method of building flexible combat commands, ad hoc task forces drawn from different battalions for a specific job, rests on the assumption that they'll all talk the same way on day one. That's a radio promise as much as a staff officer's imagination. If you've ever watched a unit move like a school of fish, shifting and flowing without visible signals, you're watching a net in action. The German expectation, often, not always, was that the man with the antenna farm is the one you have to break to wreck coordination. In an American company where every tank has voice that carries, that math doesn't hold. None of this is meant to sneer at opponents. It's meant to underline a hard, official lesson. A good radio net is a combat multiplier you can count. It reduces blue on blue. It speeds fires. It shrinks the gap between seeing and doing, and it travels well. From deserts to mountains to hedgerows to river crossings. Because it is simple, stable, and standardized. Hold that thought, because our next steps are where the paperwork meets the battlefield. We're going to walk through the official Signal Corps histories that explain why FM became standard in armored vehicles. We'll open the technical manuals that spell out channel ranges, power ratings, and installation diagrams inside U.S. medium tanks. We'll compare that to wartime evaluations of German armored radio suites and the practical limits soldiers reported under movement and fire. Then we'll test those specs against moments you know by name. Italian ridgelines, Norman hedgerows, and a river crossing where radio speed turned a chance into a bridgehead. If you're enjoying the ride so far, good, because what the German army missed will become clearest when we step into those pages and let the numbers and diagrams do the talking. In a minute, we'll trace a single channel from a commander's microphone to a battalion's ear and watch how a unit acts as one without seeing each other at all. And when you hear that, you'll understand why crews who live through it still talk about their radios with the same fondness they reserve for their engines and guns. Stay with me. The strongest proof comes next, the quiet, convincing kind that lives in manuals, reports, and campaign histories. And once you've heard it, I want your take. Does the network beat the platform, or is that just a historian's tidy phrase? Tell me where you stand, because the debate is half the fun, and the conclusion might change how you look at every battle from then to now. Open the manual with me. Not a memoir, not a rumor, a wartime technical manual. Inside, the tank radio set isn't treated like a mystery. It's a checklist, a diagram, a guarantee that channel 1 in your Sherman is channel 1 in mine because crystals fix the frequency where it belongs. The transmitter is rated to put real power on the air. The receivers are designed to stay locked when the hull shakes and the gun barks. The interphone ties the crew together so that a loader's single word can move 4 men at once. This is how you turn a platoon into a conversation. Now translate diagrams into muscle memory. Before a march, crews verify the channel card, test transmit and receive, and confirm intercom headsets. The platoon leader checks both nets, the local platoon net and the company command net, because he's the hinge between what he sees and what higher command intends. When the column starts, radio discipline takes over. Short calls, standard words, no poetry, just meaning. A bad net sounds busy. A good net sounds calm. Here's why preset matters. In a fight, time evaporates while you hunt a tuning knob. With crystals, you don't hunt. You select. If the company order pushes everyone to channel 3, you're on channel 3 in a heartbeat. If you need fires, you pop to the support net, speak your piece, and return. You're not spinning a dial. In a tank that's trying to throw you at the ceiling, you're pressing an advantage, certainty. Let's give that certainty a landscape. North Africa first. Sand turns distance into a lie and hides hull-down positions a few hundred meters away. In that haze, a net that carries clean voice is oxygen. You hear the contact call once. You react once. Units that trained on the same procedures in the States are now using those procedures under artillery. That continuity matters. It's one thing to practice brevity at a stateside range. It's another to use it when the air is full of dust and steel. Move the map to Sicily and then the spine of Italy. The terrain punishes radio, but the habit of clear nets keeps units knitting themselves together. Platoons crest different ribs of a ridge and still coordinate halts, bounds, and arcs. Reports aren't shouted through the wind. They're spoken into headsets and relayed on channels that don't drift. When a battalion diary says, "Units maintained," communication, it reads dry. On the ground, it means the last thing you heard wasn't static. It was your friend's voice. Now, Normandy. The hedgerows are not just vegetation. They're walls. Every lane is a blind corner. The armored net does its job inside the armored force, but there's a seam between tanks and infantry. Different radios, different frequency families. The field fix is beautifully practical. Mount a rugged telephone on the tank's exterior and wire it into the intercom. A rifleman grabs the handset. The commander answers, and in 2 sentences a near disaster turns into a halt, a pivot, a safe shot. First it's improvisation, then it's instruction. That's the rhythm of a war that learns. Inside the Sherman, this all feels ordinary. And that's the point. You don't think about modulation theory when you say reverse one length. You think about the reply you can count on, reversing. Frequency modulation and crystal control don't feel like technology. They feel like trust. AM in a lab is fine. AM inside a moving steel box full of motors and ignition is a promise the environment works hard to break. FM keeps more of your meaning intact when the world gets loud. That's not a slogan. It's a human experience under stress. What about German armor? Their engineers knew radios. Their doctrine valued coordinated movement. But production realities, battlefield conditions, and a net design that often reserved full transmit capability to leaders created a fragile loop. Orders down were strong. Warnings up were weaker. In quiet conditions with tight formations, that can work. In broken terrain, with units scattered and seconds in play, it means the man who first sees the threat may not be the man whose voice the net will carry. When you read wartime evaluations, the pattern is consistent. Interference in motion, range shortened in the worst moments, and too many receiver-only sets in line tanks. Bring in a moment that tests everything. A confused engagement where companies intermingle and nobody can see the whole fight. In American units, a tank you've never met can join your net, call by the book, and be effective in a minute. That's not romance. It's standardization. The manual the replacement studied is the same manual the veteran studied. The voice procedures match. The channel plan matches. The hardware matches. And under stress, sameness is a weapon. Shift forward in the timeline. As Allied formations roll into France, a pattern emerges. Requests for fire from tanks move predictably over the air to fire direction centers that know exactly what net to monitor and what pro words to expect. Recon elements feed warnings that arrive in time to matter because the net's noise floor doesn't drown them. Ad hoc task forces. The famous combat commands spin up out of pieces from different parent units and still function on day one because the radio language is common and the gear is compatible by design. Now, a river, the Rhine, a bridge the enemy meant to drop stands unexpectedly on the far bank. What makes a chance into a crossing is speed. Speed of report, speed of decision, speed of movement. That speed lives on the net. A unit on the spot speaks. Higher hears. Adjacent divisions shift. Military engineers get orders fast enough to act while the window is still open. None of that requires floored radio calls. It requires dependable ones. Let's get our hands greasy for a minute. A tank radio set is only as good as its installation. Manuals obsess over grounding straps, cable runs, dynamotor mounting, antenna bases, and connector security because those are the places where a good design dies. In a Sherman that's been hammering along for hours, screws back out. Dust creeps in. Vibrations turn a press fit into a loose rattle. The reason crews trust their sets is that the installation procedures anticipated this abuse. Lock washers, safety wire, shock mounts, and explicit test routines. You don't fight the last battle. You fight the next bounce. Inside the headset, you hear the difference. Contact right. And then, in a clean net, seen, covering, on. Those aren't theatrical lines. They're how a platoon keeps its shape while nobody can see anyone else. And when the commander is listening to two nets at once, he becomes the translator between intent and fact, upward to the company and downward to the guns. He isn't choosing which truth to hear. He's hearing both truths and acting. Pause and step back. What the German army missed, ultimately, was the strategic weight of making good radios universal, not special issue, not for the chosen few. Universal. The choice to make dependable FM voice a baseline for medium tanks turned an adequate vehicle into a node in a network that multiplied force. The doctrine of flexible task organization, the habit of rapid fires, the ability to improvise tank, infantry voice. Links. These are all behaviors of a force that expects to be connected and then ensures it is. There's humility in this story, too. American sets failed at times. Weather and terrain did ugly things. Crews made mistakes. But the pattern that official histories and manuals trace is consistent. When the net held, units moved faster, shot faster, and survived more often. When it frayed, everything slowed and casualties rose. The radios didn't win battles alone. They made winning possible more often. And that leads us to the climactic question, the one our title points at. If two sides bring steel of similar quality, who wins? The side with the thicker armor, or the side with the thicker web of connection? In the final stretch of this video, we'll match specific equipment specs to specific battlefield moments. Italy's ridgelines, Normandy's hedgerows, and a river crossing that turned into an unexpected gateway, and show how the net, not the gun, bent outcomes. Don't go anywhere. Next, we're opening the Signal Corps' own history and the Tank Radio Technical Manual to walk, point by point, through the specs that mattered most. Frequency ranges, preset channels, power paths, intercom integration, and the dual receiver edge for commanders. Then we'll put those specs beside wartime evaluations of German armored communications and let the comparisons speak in plain language. When you hear that, I want your verdict in the comments. Did the network decide these fights? Or do you see it another way? Tell me, because this is where history turns into an argument worth having. Turn the page to the Signal Corps' own wartime history, and you see something rare in military writing. Clarity without drama. It explains, step by step, why armored forces standardized on dependable FM voice for medium tanks, and why crystal-controlled presets weren't a luxury, but a necessity. The authors don't sell you heroism. They sell you repeatable procedure, power supply stabilized and filtered, antenna installation, prescribed, bonded, and tested, receivers that hold to their channels under shock and heat, an interphone that turns four men into one mind. Read between the lines and you hear the thesis. Reliability is the most lethal feature. Now open the Tank Radio Technical Manual and picture the crew before a move. Channel card verified, crystals seated, net check, send, receive, interphone clear, commander monitoring two nets, because he is the hinge between what his platoon sees and what the company intends. This is not color, it's cadence. A disciplined net sounds calm because it is built to keep meaning intact while steel and fire try to tear it apart. Here's the human translation of those diagrams. Presets mean you don't hunt, you select. Interphone means nobody shouts, everybody acts. FM means the tank's electrical chaos doesn't come along for the ride in your headset. Stabilized power means a climbing ridge line doesn't turn your transmitter into a rumor. And when every medium tank in, the formation has the same gear, the same plan, the same words, the same tests, you gain something that's hard to measure and impossible to fake. Shared certainty. Set the manuals aside and step back into Tunisia. The official campaign history uses quiet language for loud events. Armored columns maintain contact across broken ground. Artillery answers calls that arrive in time. Units improvise under pressure without losing the thread. The text is sober, but the pattern is a drumbeat. Nets that. Hold, reduce, surprise. And surprise is what kills most quickly. When after-action summaries repeat, communications maintained. They're not filling space. They're recording lives kept in the fight. Carry that drumbeat to Sicily and Italy. Valleys should have smothered voice, and sometimes they did. But again and again, reports record enough net discipline and enough FM resilience to keep movement coordinated. Platoons on separate ribs of a ridge bound forward as if they can see each other. Because the net gives them a picture neither I can hold alone. A tank turns a corner, sees a threat, and in one sentence the danger belongs to everyone, not just the first crew in harm's way. Then the hedgerows. The armored net does its job inside the armored world, but there's a seam with infantry, different sets, different frequency families. The field fix, later formalized, is blunt and brilliant. A rugged telephone bolted to the tank, wired to the interphone so that a rifleman can speak directly to the commander under armor. That detail shows up in records not as a romance, but as an instruction. Parts listed, mounting points described. A habit made official because it worked. The network widens because the foundation is stable enough to carry more weight. Now consider the other side of the hill. Evaluations of German armored communications in this period are frank, capable sets, skilled operators, but AM voice vulnerable to the exact noise a tank generates in motion, range. Shortened by movement when range is most needed, and an uneven distribution of full transmit capability that often concentrates voice in leaders' vehicles. Orders down are solid, warnings up are fragile. In close, controlled conditions, the model holds. In broken terrain with seconds to spare, it punishes the first crew to see the thing that matters. This is where dual receivers in the commander's position become decisive in ways diagrams can't dramatize. He can hear the company's intent and his platoon's truth without choosing between them. He doesn't wait to be told what he already knows, and he doesn't deny hire what his men have discovered. The manual lists part numbers. The battlefield translates them into tempo. Watch how that tempo multiplies in France. Requests for fire move along known paths to fire direction centers staffed and trained to those paths. Recon elements speak in time to matter because the noise floor is low enough that brevity is enough. Ad hoc task forces. Armored, infantry, engineers. Assemble like machine parts because the radio language is common and the gear compatible by design. The official histories do not brag. They record a bureaucracy of speed. And then a bridge appears where a bridge should not stand. A unit on the spot speaks plainly and fast. Higher hears plainly and fast. Adjacent formations shift, engineers move. Armor holds a perimeter that didn't exist an hour earlier. The reports are clinical. Who called whom? At what time? What action followed? Yet in that chain of sentences is the reason the opportunity didn't vanish. The net moved decisions as quickly as engines moved steel. Let's get very practical in the way only a technical manual dares. A tank's electrical system is a filthy place for a radio. Ignition spikes, generator ripple, motor whine. The installation procedures aren't optional. Ground straps aren't suggestions. Shock mounts aren't nice to have. When crews follow the book, the set survives what the road does to it. When the set survives, the net survives. When the net survives, units behave like a single organism in places where sight and sound fail. Inside the headset, that organism sounds like this: hold, holding, shift left, shifting, mark, on. It is dull to read and thrilling to live because it means you are not alone. The man 3 hedgerows away might as well be in your turret for how quickly his observation becomes your action. And when the commander rides 2 nets at once, he cleans the seam between local reality and larger plan without making his men wait for him to switch dials and find the thread again. What the German army missed, what our title points to, is not that Americans had radios, but that Americans made dependable, unit-wide FM voice the default tool of survival and speed, not an accessory, not for some, for everyone who needed it. That universality is why a replacement crew can join your net and be useful in minutes. It's why a task force assembled at dawn functions by noon. It's why an opportunity spotted by one tank becomes a maneuver executed by many. Hold on to that, because the strongest proof is still ahead. We're going to match the most. Meaningful specifications, frequency families, preset channels, output power, interphone integration, installation discipline, to specific battlefield problems, a ridge that hides friends, a lane that hides enemies, a river that dares you to be slow. We'll let official histories and manuals do the heavy lifting with their quiet sentences and precise diagrams. And we'll translate them back into what a crew heard in their headsets when it mattered. And when we're done, I want your voice in this net. Does the network beat the platform when both sides bring steel? Or is that too neat for the dirt and terror of real combat? Tell me in the comments where you land, because this is the moment where documents, doctrine, and lived experience meet, and reasonable people can argue well. Stay with me. The last act is the sharpest. Open the book to the page that matters most. The moment where specifications meet the dirt. 3 problems, 3 proofs. A ridge you can't see over, a lane you shouldn't drive into, and a river that won't wait. Problem 1. The ridge. Italy, broken country, switchbacks and ravines. Your platoon is split by terrain. 2 and 3 on the left rib, you and 4 on the right. On paper, coordination here is a fantasy. In the headset, it's a checklist. Hold line, holding, bound, bounding. The commander rides 2 nets, platoon and company, without taking his ears away from either truth. He hears the higher intent, and he hears your loader's warning in the same breath. He doesn't pick one. He relays both. The left rib reports a machine gun nest masked by scrub. Company's intent is to keep pressure forward. Those facts don't conflict. They inform. He shifts 1 tank to cover, calls for smoke, moves the bound 1 ridge at a time. The ridge never lets you see your friends. The net never lets you lose them. Now the engineering hiding inside that calm. Preset channels mean you don't fumble for a dial while the engine bucks. FM voice means your own ignition system doesn't hitch a ride on your words. Stabilized power means the steep climb that drags amperage up and down doesn't turn your voice into a quiver. The interphone makes a loader's single word a crew reflex. There's nothing mystical here. There's simply a system that protects meaning from the tank itself. Problem 2. The lane. Normandy's hedgerows, a green maze with eyes. Your column noses toward a gap that looks like an invitation. Every instinct says, careful, and instinct is not enough. A rifleman slaps the tank telephone mounted on your rear plate. The commander answers without leaving the armor. 2 sentences. Don't enter. Panzer Faust left corner. That sentence doesn't bounce around for a minute while someone finds the right channel. It goes straight into your interphone, becomes the gunner's arc, the driver's angle, the loader's readiness. You ease left, cover the corner, and call the company net in a voice that doesn't betray the adrenaline. Ambush sign, left of gap, covering, infantry clearing. The platoon behind you hears it once and adjusts once. In fields that turn units into blind men, the net hands you eyes. Open the manual in your mind, and you can see all the small decisions that made that moment reliable. The telephone wiring diagram that ties an external handset to the interphone. The recommended mounting points so a bump won't shear the cable. The instruction to test the line before a move. The note that a commander's dual receiver setup lets him listen to company traffic while his crew deals with the immediate threat. The field improvisation became official because it worked. And it worked because the base system was stable enough to accept the extra load without wobbling. Problem 3. The river. A bridge still standing when it should be gone. You arrive not with a plan designed weeks ago, but with a net designed to carry one made in minutes. The unit on the bank reports. Higher hears. Adjacent formations shift. Engineers roll. Armor holds a perimeter. None of this is theatrical on the air. It's routine. Clear call signs. Known channels. Words used the same way by every unit that trained on the same book. The bridgehead doesn't hold because somebody shouted loudest. It holds because the sentences moved faster than doubt. Now let's drill into a place where battles are won quietly. The installation. A tank is a factory of bad electricity. The book insists on grounding straps that turn the hull into a partner instead of a parasite, on power supplies that shave off the generator's ripple, on shock mounts that keep the transmitter from shattering itself on. Washboard roads. A radio that's designed well and installed carelessly is a rumor. A radio designed well and installed by the book is a voice you can rely on when steel screams. The crews who lived inside those hulls learned quickly which category theirs belonged to. Return to the other side of the hill, because fairness makes the lesson stronger. German tank radios of the period were competently built. In the best conditions, they worked, but the battlefield rarely offers best AM voice in A. Moving, sparking, grinding vehicle invites interference to come along for the ride. Range that looks fine on a chart collapses when the tracks churn and the turret motors whine. A net where only some vehicles can transmit keeps order until the vehicle that needs to speak is not one of them. None of this reflects a lack of courage or skill. It reflects a set of technical and production choices meeting a world that punished them. If you want to hear doctrine evolve in real time, listen to A company in contact the moment a new threat appears. In a fragile net, messages get longer as people repeat themselves, ask for clarification, and fight the medium while fighting the enemy. In a strong net, messages get shorter. Stop, stop, smoke, on. The shorter the words, the more trust is baked in. That trust was trained, yes. But it was also earned by equipment that didn't force men to wrestle it in their worst moments. You can chart that trust onto a map. In North Africa, clear nets let artillery answer armored calls at the speed of an engine's gear change. In Italy, clear nets let platoons behave like a single organism over ground that made eyes useless. In Normandy, a simple telephone brought infantry voices into steel, closing a seam that hedgerows made lethal. In France's open country, ad hoc combat commands formed before breakfast and fought before noon because gear and language matched across units. These aren't slogans. They're the common rhythm of official reports that refuse to embellish and therefore convince. Slip back into the Sherman's turret and feel how the small pieces remove friction. The commander's second receiver keeps him bilingual. One ear for immediate reality, one ear for the larger plan. The preset channels keep transitions instant. The interphone keeps the crew from degrading under stress into four men shouting. The filtered power keeps the set from warbling when the generator's mood changes. The whip antenna stays bonded to the hull because someone bothered with the right lock washer and the right torque. Each detail takes one excuse away from failure. Now give that net to a replacement crew. They've trained on the same handset, handled the same connectors, read the same checklist, and learned the same brevity. They slide into a formation that's already moving and, because sameness is a weapon, become useful in minutes. There are no idiosyncrasies to master, no local dialect to decode. They don't need to be brilliant. They need to be standard. That is the quiet genius of universal equipment and universal procedure. What the German army missed, finally, is the cost of being almost connected. In a laboratory, almost connected is impressive. In a platoon under fire, almost connected is a blind corner you never clear. A net that makes every crew a sender and a receiver turns an adequate vehicle into a part of a larger machine whose performance exceeds any one hull's thickness or gun length. A net that makes only some crews senders and others permanent listeners shrinks the number of eyes that can become a voice in time. You can hear that difference in the way units react to surprise. In a fragile net, surprise spreads faster than orders. In a strong net, orders outrun surprise. A single sighting becomes a shared adjustment before fear can metastasize. That is not about bravery. It's about bandwidth you can trust. Take a breath and test the thesis against a battle famed for chaos. Mist, mixed units, unseen approaches, tanks moving like ghosts. The side that coordinated through fog wasn't doing so by semaphore. It was doing so by voice. Carried on nets that treated noise as an adversary and doctrine as muscle memory. When evaluations later called out the reliability of those nets, they did not praise polish. They praised the absence of friction. You can win with grit. You win more often with grit and a medium that doesn't fight you. There's a temptation to chase exotica, esoteric ciphers, rare hardware, dramatic gadgets. The truth that turns out to matter most is stubbornly plain. FM voice, crystal presets, interphone discipline, filtered power, standardized installation. Put those into every medium tank and you change what a formation can do. Hold them back, and you force brave crews to solve physics with courage alone. Listen again to the sound of a healthy company in motion. It's not chatter, it's not silence, it's a heartbeat. Online, on, contact, scene, shift, shifting. There's room in that cadence for initiative, because initiative shares a medium with intent. A gunner's moment of intuition doesn't have to wait for a leader's microphone to work. It has a voice of its own. We're closing on the crest now. The last turn in this story is the sharpest because it asks you to weigh steel against sentences. If two forces bring comparable machines to a fight, and one of them can make faster, clearer, more universal sense out of confusion, which one do you bet on? Before you answer, we'll open the official histories one more time and let them speak plainly about the battles where connection outran isolation, ridgelines, lanes, and riverbanks where the difference between message sent and message received separated units that endured from units that dissolved. Stay with me for the final act. We'll stitch the case studies together, draw the line from hardware to habit to outcome, and leave you with one last scene that lives in the headset of every crewman who learned to trust a quiet, steady voice under armor. Then I'll ask for your verdict and your story, because some of you watching have worn headsets of your own, and your words can turn this from history into a conversation worth keeping.